So we have you to thank for this extensive catalog that we have on Pandora.
Welcome to the Style and Vibes podcast with me, Michaela. I'll be giving you the inside scoop on music, fashion, culture, and more from Caribbean celebrities and tastemakers across the globe, pushing our culture with authenticity and, of course, style and vibes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Style and Vibes podcast with yours truly. If you are new here, welcome to the family. If you are coming back, welcome back, family. And I haven't done a podcast in a while with a guest, so I'm really honored and excited to welcome today Diego Herrera. So Diego is the business director of business development at Ineffable Records, but he also has done some work with Pandora. And I really want to get into his career path. And he just told me he's from Costa Rica. So we're going to get into all the things about Diego. Welcome to Diego. Welcome to the family.
Thank you so much. And I am also honored and excited to be here speaking with you. Like, been checking for this podcast for a long time and just everything you do. So, thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, another digital connection. I feel like we've been following each other for a while and just haven't had the chance to, one, meet in person and two, connect offline. So I'm so excited that we are doing this today. But please tell me, you were telling me that you are from Costa Rica. So let's go back to Costa Rica. Tell me how you grew up and how you came to the States.
Yeah, so born in Costa Rica, both my parents are from there. And I am, first generation immigrant. Interestingly enough, my parents came over, and my older sister was born here in the States. And then when they moved back, I was born there. And then they said, well, we got to get back to the States. So we went back to the States eventually. Yeah. But, and then, kind of life was just, living between two worlds, like moving between California and in the Bay Area, here, I live in Oakland. And Costa Rica. I'm from Heredia, which is, I always say we have a soccer team and a soccer stadium. So it's kind of one of the bigger cities, in the country. But yeah, so that was kind of life. It was just interesting to be between two worlds. I think maybe some of your, podcast listeners can relate to and understand that kind of traveling between, I hate these terms, but the first world and the third world, and kind of seeing the differences.
Yes, and I hate that, especially when we're in a first world, quote unquote country, but it's like coded in third world.
Yep. Exactly. Right. Maybe let's not dive into politics too soon, but there's a lot of stuff that happens in both places that is just human behavior, right? So
yeah.
But yeah, so growing up in both, it was, speaking about the musical component of it, it was really interesting to be exposed to all kinds of music on both sides. I mean, I'm a child of the 80s, so grew up here, and I remember hearing Run DMC for the first time and hearing Michael Jackson when I was a kid, and then going back to Costa Rica, and it'd be Rubén Blades, and it would be Celia Cruz, and also Costa Rica is basically in the Caribbean. It's a Central American country, but there is a heavy Caribbean influence there, especially being right next to Panama, where there was a lot of immigration that happened in regards to the construction of the Panama Canal, and this big influence that infused the Atlantic side of the Central American countries in that area. So in the same breath, or in the same kind of listening space, you'd be hearing music from Bob Marley. You'd be hearing the reggae artists of the 80s. You'd be hearing what the early reggaeton sounds. And I always fondly recall they had one of those video box type shows on TV, where an hour out of the day they would just show music videos. This is before YouTube and those, all the stuff we have now, where you can instantaneously watch stuff. You had to actually tune in and watch these videos. And I remember seeing back to back when I was a kid, the video for Muévelo by El General, right next to Old Dog by Beanie Man in this video countdown. So that's kind of what life was like. And then, coming back to the States, and you're getting all these other influences. And my parents were also kind of hippies, like rocker kids. So like my dad was actually very much into rock music, and kind of like got absorbed that influence from him. And yeah, so that was, that was like early life, and that I think is kind of set the foundation for where my musical interests would go, through my young adulthood and into my adult years. Yeah.
Yeah, I went to Costa Rica a few years ago. I went to Guanacaste, and
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised when we went out like almost every night, and I heard dancehall and reggae every night that we went
Oh yeah.
out. And it was my first time in a Latin American country besides Mexico, and I just didn't expect it because I had never experienced it, but I was pleasantly surprised, had such an amazing time. And I think it really, that travel element really opens up the cultural experiences and exchange, to kind of really understanding what people say when they say like, well, we listen to that kind of music here. And you're like, well, you don't really grasp it, but to be able to experience it was so beautiful. And I had such an amazing time. So now I know that you have gone back and forth, and tell me about how you got into the music business here. Like, what was your 20s? Like, how did you start? And you're like, I want to do music. What led to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in music as a listener, right? First and foremost, I just always seem to really be tuned into music. I mean, even now, one of the interesting moments I continually have in this like world of on-demand streaming and just instant access to everything is being constantly transported back to moments in my younger days, vis-a-vis like a song. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, oh, I remember exactly where I was when I heard this song in the 80s, whatever. I referenced earlier Run DMC. I remember hearing Tricky for the first time, and I was like writing. I had heard it and was like riding on my bike as a kid, and I remember crashing my bike because I was kind of like so distracted, like thinking of this song. And so, that was like kind of the start for me. It's just that I was always interested in music. I just always had music in my head. And then, when I was in grade school, middle school, I started kind of like taking on more of an interest. My parents started, tried putting us in piano lessons, but they didn't really like take for me. But then I picked up a guitar one day, and that was it. Like I just ran with it. Started being really interested in performing music. I was like in middle school, I even did like choir for like half a year. So
Let me find out you got some singing chops.
you know what? When we'll go to karaoke sometime, I'll show you a thing or two.
Yes.
But go ahead.
I'll save it for the end.
Okay, all right. Yeah, but even like the choir experience, which is something I had kind of just recently like just popped back in my head. That was another kind of one of these like musical moments that stood out to me. We had this kind of interesting choir teacher who she liked to pick kind of non-traditional music for us to learn as choir songs. So that was actually my first introduction to hearing Duke Ellington. She had us learn A Train, and she had us learn Mood Indigo as two songs that we sang in choir. And then also we did like a song, like this kind of like Baroque choir song in German, and then this other song, it was like one of the themes to The Wiz. You remember that movie, The Wiz? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I got into performing, I started being more interested in, kind of like exploring all these other things. I was in like punk rock bands, and I started playing, like listening to and playing reggae, like, when I was in my early teen, I've been listening to reggae earlier than that, but I think in my teens is like really where, like I connected with it. I remember hearing Barrington Levy, and just being kind of mystified by his voice and even the production sound. And it was just like drums and bass. And it's kind of like, I was like, whoa, this is just so kind of different even than Bob Marley, because Bob Marley is just very like big. There's a big kind of like band sound to it. And you hear this like the early dance hall from the 80s. And some of the songs are just literally stripped down to like a couple of instruments with like, the engineer mixing in tracks or mixing in the other elements of the songs. And so that was kind of, to me, was the awakening moment for kind of reconnecting again to my experience, like being in Costa Rica and being exposed to like these different styles of reggae kind of peripherally, but then, it's like sometimes when when you're in your teens and it's kind of like a formative time for you, right? It's kind of like
Mhm.
part of when you really develop your personality. And I think that was kind of a moment for me that really happened during that development and stuck. And so that's
Mhm.
kind of where it's been for me, like, since then, for the most part. Yeah.
So in terms of, so you really are at this time focused on the performing arts and being in front of people. When did you decide to be more behind the scenes?
Well, in my early 20s, I did do some radios, like college radio, local radio style stuff at a station called KFJC. And I had a radio show there for 4 years. And
I'm a radio kid myself. I
yeah,
did radio in
yeah,
college
we're
too.
a special group, I think, it was eye-opening to me in the sense that you kind of get to see the magic behind the curtain, or how it happens. Like, when you listen to the radio, you don't really realize how much stuff is happening operationally. It's just kind of,
Mhm.
it just happens, right? And but when you're actually behind the board and you're the one queuing up you know ads, or station IDs, and then you're also queuing up the music, and you kind of are like this octopus, and then you have to get on the mic and actually like back announce, and you have to like be composed in how you speak, and deliver the kind of performance part of radio for the listener. I think that experience was pretty invaluable, and it just kind of led me. I think, like, part of my musical journey and my journey in the industry has been trying out a lot of different things. So even you know um, producing my own shows, um, some audio engineering type stuff. I was also started DJing. I was like DJing in my 20s, and like have been a DJ now for like 20 years, so show promotion and kind of everything that comes along with those things. And then also, of course, the art of DJing itself. So all of that eventually led to when I got the opportunity to apply to be on the music team at Pandora. And I didn't have much, let's say, like uh, prior experience in the sense of, I hadn't worked at a DSP or anything like that before that. But I did, had to undergo the trial by fire, which was the interview process there. It was like a very long and kind of drawn out interview process. And they basically, had confidence that I would at least be able to handle at the time what was like the librarian stuff.
Mhm.
And so that's where I started there. And eventually, just did what I was supposed to be doing for that part of the job, which was, it was like library maintenance. You know what I mean? It was acquiring music. It was putting it, tending to metadata, doing all the similar to the radio, like doing all the kind of like unsexy things behind the scenes that make for the listener experience, like a good listener experience on the front end. And then after a while,
Give us the details of the unsexy. I feel like, from the outside looking in, the industry looks extremely sexy, but there are so many different opportunities behind the scenes as well. So when you say library, I'm assuming that's like catalog management of
yeah.
like the singles and the albums. So like, what did you have to do exactly?
Yeah, I think that it was exactly that. I mean, there were, at the very beginning, it was literally that I would get a sheet of failed catalog searches, like the searches that listeners made that resulted in like no result. And it
Mhm.
would be everything. It would be like Japanese math rock, and it would be, easy listening, and it might be like a jazz album, but just this big sheet of stuff. And this is at the time when Pandora was still hadn't really developed a content like pipeline system. There was one, but it was not as refined as what it would eventually be. And so we were actually, in these early days, like actually purchasing music and uploading it to a library. And
Mm.
then to do that, like even before you would complete the upload, you do the unsexy like metadata part. And we had metadata standards, that the company had that basically mirrored what was supposed to be happening on the front end. You didn't want like weird characters or anything like that appearing for listeners when they were listening, when they look and see, oh, what's this song? It might have like some weird ampersand or something thrown in there. So we'd have to go in and manually like do all that metadata maintenance by hand. We're talking about dozens of titles, just from that one sheet that I would get, to work off of. And then there was, the other thing, which was like kind of like the research, right? We used to call it radars, where you would, be like, hey, what kind of music should we be pulling in? Like who's trending, who's hot, who's an interesting artist, and you go and grab maybe if they had catalog music that was out that we hadn't yet put into our system, you might grab that and bring it all in, So that's kind of actually led to, I think, kind of opened the door for me in terms of being eventually taking on the role of like head of Caribbean content at Pandora, which was my love, my musical love, was that I love, everything Caribbean related, like all the music. And so I saw there was gaps in the catalogs for a lot of artists. And so what I was doing was on my, it's like on my spare time that I had, I would be like completing those artists' catalogs. I'll be like, oh, okay, what do we have from Beanie Man? Like what do we not have from Beanie Man? Like I want to make sure this catalog is complete. And yeah, so that led to the kind of like the earliest opportunities when the heads of the department came to me and said, hey, you seem to know this music really well, and you seem to be connected, to the history of it, the culture of it. So like, why don't we get you start working on some of these stations? Like,
so we have you to thank for this extensive catalog that we have on Pandora.
yeah. I mean, well, for sure, early on, eventually they developed a content delivery system that was much more refined, and that was essentially, what was happening with every DSP was, the idea of like, oh, I don't know if you remember this, but there was like kind of like there was a period of time when all the DSPs were bragging about how much music they had. It was like, oh, we boast over, 30 million titles or whatever. But the reality of it was that everybody had pretty much everything, assuming, they had made the deals with all the different distributors and labels. So,
all right. So tell me how that transitioned into your role currently.
Yeah. So as time went on and I was doing more and more programming, and I was kind of working on the artist marketing side more explicitly, and I'm developing more direct relationships with people. I was at Pandora for almost 10 years, so this is like, there was a chunk of time where I was kind of like just doing the library stuff and kind of behind the scenes. And it eventually evolved into being more in front and trying to like do what I was really kind of like run down what I saw great opportunities to connect with artists and provide visibility and to expand the listenership on Pandora. And I had this philosophy of kind of like, I want listeners to have the experience that if they come and listen here and they search for anything, no matter what it is in these genres, that they're going to be able to find it. And not just that, but they'll be able to find some sort of editorial option to listen, right? Because it is one thing to go. I mean, I'm sure everyone has this to a certain extent, that you get your phone with whatever music listening service that you like to use in front of you, and you pop it open, you're like, oh, I want to listen to something, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, damn, I don't even know what to listen to. There's so many options, So I really wanted to have there be an experience for anyone at who was going to listen on Pandora, that if they went and wanted to listen to Jab Soca, there'd be a whole Jab Soca station for them to listen to. There'd be like a playlist or multiple playlists. Or if they wanted to listen to like women in reggae and just really like dive into that there's also a station and a playlist, and it's representative, And then depending on the size of the let's say like the demand for any particular thing, there might be multiple options. And then, then there was kind of like the, that evolved into the more kind of marquee kind of listening branded opportunities, launching stations like Pull Up, which is all supposed to be brand new dance hall. And, the idea was just get like the hottest new stuff on it, and also have artists represented, like with the station takeovers, and we did stuff with like Spice, and I can't. It's failing me. I can't remember at this time who else, but I think we did one with Cranium. We did one with Shaggy, and just ultimately just really trying to kind of like fill this out so that there was a really like excellent listening experience for anyone that came to platform. After doing that for a number of years, basically Pandora, like many of the DSPs, decided to slim down the workforce. So I got caught up in like wave 3 or 4, whatever it was, of the layoffs. Which in hindsight, it may have been time. I was already there for nearly a decade, and while it was comfortable, it was kind of like a great opportunity for me to say, well, what else is there out there for me to do?
Mm-hmm.
I've already done all these other things. I've done performance, I've done DJing, I've done show promotion, I've done some radio, I've had this amazing time at Pandora working at a DSP. Like, what else in the industry is out there? I think the reality of the marketplace is that all the DSPs are slimming down in pretty much in every way, and trying to run. I don't know. I guess the corporate term would be like run more efficiently or something like that.
Yes. Meaning
So
more work and less dollars.
yeah,
Less
exactly.
cost.
Yeah,
You're trying to trim
we'll probably
the
get to a little
cost.
bit more of that later, but yeah. So over the years, I just built up like some really great relationships, and had a really flattering response to when I announced that I was not going to be at Pandora anymore. And there were some opportunities that became immediately available to me, and there was some other stuff that I kind of looked into and explored and weighed my options. And Ineffable just seemed like a really great fit. It really seemed like a place where I could come in and really pursue the things that I think were going to be the most interesting to me, which were helping a company develop more on the business side, but then also like working directly with artists and helping develop projects. In particular, that was something that Adam, the president of Ineffable, and I had talked about very explicitly. Was like, I want to be closer to the kind of the nucleus of the company and like the decision making, and kind of like trying to figure out the direction of where this company is going to go in the next few years. But also, I still want to be working hands on with people, and there's that creative side to me. I really I have such an admiration and appreciation for the artists and everything that they put into the music, and I wanted to like continue that path too, of having a creative contribution.
That sounds amazing. So it sounds like you probably have at least gone from this very structured, you kind of know what you're going to do, to this now creative space of not doing whatever you want to do, but having your hand in, like, you get to decide how little or how much you are investing in a particular project, from beginning to end. Are my assumptions correct, or?
Yeah, I mean, working in a corporate environment is interesting. I don't know that I ever 100% really ever fit into it, because I still, in my time there, always had this kind of like working, I don't know, on a street level mentality. You know what I mean? At the time that I was doing my job at Pandora, I was still doing my own events and show promoting, and I'd be at night like going and putting up flyers to get people to the events. So I still had this kind of hungry mentality that didn't always, I think, connect with the kind of the seemingly cool, calm, collected, organized like facade that I think a lot of the the corporate environment and emphasizes. Coming to Ineffable, I think for me has been an amazing experience, because it's not corporate; it's an independent company. You're actually able to speak directly to like and be part of the top decision making team, as related to the direction of a project or direction of the company. And ultimately, being that close, I think, makes all the difference to me. I think when you work at a corporation, for as valuable as you may be made to feel at any given point, at the end of the day, you're still a number on a spreadsheet. And I think that it is evident in what's happening across the industry at every DSP. And even outside of the music industry, you see the same thing happening at a lot of other companies, large companies that have employed, tens of thousands of people, that, jobs are lost, determined.
Mm-hmm.
Jobs are basically valued only to a certain extent as it affects the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
So not to get too serious here, but I think being at Ineffable is very different. It feels a lot more like the words and the contribution are valued in a way different way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not to talk down on my experience at Pandora. I loved being there, but I also, it's like it was time to do something else. Whether I wanted it to, whether I decided it myself or not, but it has ended up being like an amazing transformation for me. I feel very
So
lucky.
you touched on a good topic. It's really like the music industry, and it's just condensing year after year in terms of just people and teams. Like, what are your thoughts on the industry? I mean, there were more labels. There are definitely less labels, more artists, more music. And so it's somewhat switched on its head due to the easy accessibility to one, technology, and two, the access to distribution.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the current state of not just Caribbean music industry, but just the music industry as a whole?
Oof. I mean, that's a big question, and
That's
I
a
think
loaded
there's
question. I know, I
yeah.
know, I know.
Well, I think there's a number of different ways to look at that, to kind of
Mhm,
like answer that question. If you're gonna go cup half full, let's say, yeah, for any artist right now, it's way easier from wherever you are to get your music to a person anywhere in the world. Whereas in the past, it was like those opportunities, you had to have either independent funding or work with a label or be fortunate enough to work with a distributor to get your music to people. Now it's as easy as uploading something, and then you know uh, somebody in France or somebody in India can pull up your music and listen to it. So that's great. I don't know, thoughts on the music industry. That's such a big question. I think on the other side of it, right? If you look at it, cup half full, there are still some incredible challenges, and I think that the challenges really have more to do with capturing people's attention and the volume of music that comes out now.
mhm,
Because since there are less, you know, uh, barriers to get over to actually distribute your music internationally, um, and really, along with that, the ability to record easily at home. You don't need to have a $10,000, an hour studio or whatever it is, to actually like put together a good and thoughtful album. But the volume of the music and is makes it much more difficult. I mean, just reading the Luminate report from this year, and they were saying there was an average of like 90,000 songs or 99,000 songs that were uploaded to DSPs every day last year. Now the reality of it is that the vast majority of that stuff is not really heard. I think
mhm,
like I was looking at the number that they also provided about, they have this kind of like pyramid of this listening pyramid, and really, the top like 10 to 20,000 songs, I think, are the ones that actually are like doing the bulk of streaming.
mhm,
And a lot of those are catalog, as well as like the top currents. But and then the bottom, whatever it is, like 90 million tracks or something like that. I can't. I'm totally misquoting the number. I wish I had it in front of me. But those have gotten less than like 100 spins.
yeah,
So I think that it is a big challenge for anyone trying to release music right now to cut through all the noise, not just like the music, but also, you know, what's happening on Netflix and sports and TikTok and social media and politics, and capture people's attention. You know, I think is
Hmm.
the biggest challenge right now. Once the ability to distribute internationally with pretty much nearly instantaneous ease is happening, then it becomes like, okay, well, how do you separate yourself from those 99,000 tracks that are getting uploaded each day?
Do you think that the investment that traditionally artists would spend on creating the project is now moving into their hands to market any of the project singles that they're working on? So you talked about like, so for example, now it doesn't cost $10,000 to make a studio album, but you probably have to become a content creator and spend $5,000 on content creation tools to or and execution or a team or something. Like the money that they're spending is just shifting, and the onus is
Absolutely.
now more on the artist than the label. So what is the role of labels and artists in today's industry?
I mean, I think that depends on the label and the artist. First off, I mean, it's hard for me to speak to any other label experience. I haven't worked at any other labels. I
Mhm.
think from looking at things from the Ineffable side of, I think what we are interested is working with artists who have a vision, who understand that it takes kind of like a consistent amount of pressure to reach and grow your audience, and that are interested in the long game, not necessarily short, you know, kind of like investment and rewards. That, you know, the we view a lot of these things as kind of like, who's the right person to work with, you know, who do we think is going to invest time, effort, and kind of mirror what we're trying to bring to the table, who can fill in the gaps, you know, that we have, or where can we work with an artist to fill in the gaps that they have, you know, in their repertoire, to like make sure that when we're coupled together that we're working it like in the optimal way, you know.
Mhm.
um I think you know, broadly, the artists probably are dealing with labels primarily for budget, primarily for connections. Um, but having a budget doesn't necessarily make a project successful. It actually really starts from what the artist contributes, right? Which is their creative energy. Um, it has to do with the effort that they're going to put into to continue to connect with their audience. It has to do with you know, being open to collaboration, being open to hearing our ideas, in the same way that we need to be open to, you know, following the artist's lead. It's a bit of a dance, you know what I mean? But
Mhm.
instead of there being like one person leading, it's kind of like, all right, you know, like whose turn is it to steer our dance steps here? You know what I mean? Um, I think your question about, like, you know, the budgets and shifting, and like, is the onus on artists um, to take those budgets, kind of put them in different places? You know, for sure, there's a change in a similar way to how music distribution has become much easier. You know, the ability to promote yourself has become easier. I mean, we're all walking around with these basically like, you know, supercomputers that act as like billboards. They're like personal little billboards, right? So much so that we've all forgotten, like, when you pop this thing open, nearly half the time the first thing you see is an ad. If you open Instagram these days, probably half the time when you open it up, the first thing you see might not be your best friend's post. It might be like something from Costco or something like that, saying, hey, we have those couches that you're interested in here, you know. um, so, you know, we're now able to like do highly targeted ads that, you know, can reach consumers in ways that previously, you know, in the music industry we're not able to do. And similarly with like, you know, developing content, the ability to, I mean, you know, we're like on the verge of TikTok shutting down, right, or potentially being shut down in the United States.
Mhm.
TikTok has grown to be like this monster for the music industry in terms of raising awareness of releases. And some of that is viral, some of that is engineered, but there's no doubt that, like, artists investing in things like social media, having a part of your team, if you have a team, be that person that helps you develop content for TikTok. That stuff has become really important to the artist's repertoire, to like get their music out to fans and to have people discover their music more. I think a recent example, a success story on the Ineffable side for us was with Coco T and Kes,
Mhm.
where Kes really wasn't too active on TikTok, but we quickly realized once that song was released, as people started to kind of use the Coco T sound more and more, that there was an opportunity to like lean in on his side and make that go viral, and he did. And that I want to say that I should have this number in front of me. Can I look it up real quick? Can we edit
Yeah, yeah.
that?
I love that example, especially because I saw it pop around the holiday time, and
Hmm.
traditionally we have cocoa tea for Christmas special occasions, and it's not to be confused with hot chocolate. It's not the same.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So I think I saw that along with the concert that he had in Brooklyn, and everyone dancing outside in the cold. It was like one of the coldest days
Hmm.
here in New York, and everyone had just emptied out I think it was the Paramount.
Yeah,
And the video of everyone dancing after they had already been dancing at his concert was just as equally, a great follow-up to just all the exposure that I saw around the single itself. So I thought that
yeah,
that was exciting.
yeah. I think Kes really leaned into that moment, and the exuberance people have had almost instantly for that song is incredible. It's interesting how it just like immediately started to dominate the consciousness. I mean, I think it speaks to a number of things, like the power of Kess's songwriting, along with the other songwriters, who assisted on that, the production. But then also kind of like the infectious and like wonderful nature of soca music, that and the just like the joy that comes from that music, right? It is all about joy. And when you see that crowd of people standing outside of the Paramount singing that song after the show, just kind of continuing to bring that energy, that's I mean, that's it. That's what it's all about. That's the magic that I think like artists are really trying to create. Going back to the TikTok thing, I think it really helped him to lean into that social media platform. To date, I think the latest number is that the videos that he generated have been viewed 168 million times, and there have been 193,000 plus video creations using the Coco T sound.
Yeah.
I think that outweighs and dwarfs, what is happening on other platforms. So that kind of is one illustration potentially of, like the importance of leaning in where you see something working already, right? Like when you're talking about like putting budget towards, are we shifting budget away from, things we might have done traditionally, which, like maybe like street team or paid, like paper, like publication ads or something like that, and instead putting them into these social media outlets. Absolutely, like that stuff needs to happen for artists to be successful, for their projects to be successful, but it has to be done in the right way, because
Yeah.
it's not just like, oh, we just dump money willy-nilly into social media content and that's going to make it work. It absolutely not, because then it becomes that Costco ad that I was talking about earlier, which is not personalized. It doesn't feel genuine. Everything that Kes and the team decided to put together was conceptualized on their side. It was something that he felt good about. He's obviously like an incredibly like charming and like fun person to watch and to see interacting. So
Mhm.
if it's not genuine and it doesn't come from the heart or the soul, people are not stupid. You know what I mean? They're gonna sniff that stuff out right away, and they're gonna say like, "Oh, this is the ad for cocoa tea," instead of it being like, "Oh, look at Kes having fun." You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Look at him having fun talking about this new song that's blowing up.
So you talked about TikTok. We have to discuss the potential. Like at the time that we're recording this, it might be
Yeah.
banned in a couple days, but it might not be. Have you guys been talking about what that transition plan is going to look like? Because it's, I mean, for right now, it's just the States. It's still probably going to be available in outside of the US specifically. So what does that, how does that change from a music discoverability perspective? Like,
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that TikTok has become really important for the music industry as a whole. But my answer to that would be it was never the only thing that people should be paying attention to. Um, I think one of the conversations that we try to have with artists is that you need to be active everywhere, you know,
mhm,
because if you only focus on one place and putting all of your effort into like one part of your audience, the other audience is going to suffer and start to diminish and not see your content as much. And it is important. It's kind of like, you know, if I sell, I don't know, a jacket or a shirt or something like that, like I don't want that to just be exclusively at one store. You know, I want that to be available everywhere. And I want to be
mhm,
telling people that they can get it anywhere.
mhm,
Um, and the same thing goes for music, you know. I hate to talk about music in those terms of kind of like the store, but you know, you have to make sure that it's available in every store, and you have to make sure that you're telling people that they can find it everywhere, and you have to make sure that you're addressing people in the places where they are. Not everybody uses every service. Not everybody uses Spotify. Not everybody uses Instagram. You know what I mean?
mhm,
Some people are still only, you know, some people use Snap a lot. You know, there's some people use only TikTok, and so you know, yes, there's going to be an impact. The explosive virality of TikTok is and the way that it serves music up to people has been an interesting, you know, recent dynamic and recent development of the music industry. However, you know, if it goes away, that just means that you have to like find your audiences wherever they are after that, and put, you know, put your time and effort into connecting with them. And I also think, you know, it's I feel like because people are, you know, themselves have a bias towards using like a certain platform, that they're not often, you know, considering what's happening over here. You know, from the label side of things at Ineffable, we try as much as possible to educate ourselves and become like very familiar with as many of the platforms as we can, and really be like monitoring those things as we go along with our releases to see what is working. And that's where we, you know, when we see a spike, when we see something, you know, that is a viral moment happening, it might not be to the tune of, let's say, like a Cocoa Tea where you're talking about the millions of listeners, but if we see, for instance, like on Shazam in a country in Ghana or something like that, that your song is getting, you know, X amount of Shazams over indexing above and beyond like any other country, then we might go, oh, okay, maybe it's time for you to collaborate with an artist in that country on your next, you know, release. Or maybe, you know, this is where we put some additional ad spend on boosting that video to those listeners in that country, because it might actually, you know, lead to you having a spike in your audience there, you know. So it's difficult, I think, for artists to kind of, or really any creative, to be that involved in the minutia of every one of these platforms. And that's where we are, like, you know, trying to help a lot of the times, is to kind of point these things out and say there's an opportunity here.
mhm.
Or at the same time, if they see something and they say, hey, we see this happening over here, it's like, great, let's double down on that and see what we can do in that area. You know?
I like that. It's almost like you're kind of monitoring, one, where consumers are kind of interacting, and then two, where artists are kind of meeting their community in that interaction. So I think that that is a pretty good strategy. Now, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about streaming and I guess playlist curation is probably something you're really familiar with. How have those two things kind of changed over the last, I would say, 3 to 5 years?
Okay. Yeah, I think the DSPs, for one, are moving away from the human curator, and
Hmm.
we've seen that, almost across the board. This in particular, I think, has been really impactful in the past couple of years in regards to reggae, dancehall, soca, Caribbean music in general. It, when you don't have the people in the building who have an affinity for an understanding of the history, the culture, the trends of the music, where it's at now, where it's been, um, even thinking down the line, like who are the artists of the future that are worth kind of like trying to highlight and put some emphasis on. It becomes much more difficult for your genre or your music to reach people on these platforms. I think that you start to see. I don't like using the term gatekeeping in this context, but there is a certain kind of like gate that gets closed, and it becomes very hard to kind of like get through the gate when you don't have someone who's inside advocating in it in some
Hmm.
way.
Hmm.
Um, I think a lot of that stuff is driven, unfortunately, by the market. It's driven by the size of the audience, and I think in regards to like this is something that you kind of touched on a little bit earlier that I don't think we addressed directly, but when you're talking about like what is the state of the music industry for the Caribbean, I think that there's probably like two things to consider, or a few. There's a number of things to consider, but one of the things I would like, kind of like impart on people is like one, kind of like be thoughtful of like the size of the audience. Right? There's been a lot of discussion about the growth of Afro beats and the growth of Latin music. And part of the reason that there's been growth in all those areas is because the audience sizes are considerably larger. There's more people in just in Africa, right? Like consuming Afro beats
Hmm.
than there may be, in the combined areas of like, Jamaica and Trinidad and, the smaller islands in the Caribbean beyond that. Um, so that's one thing to think about. Um, that's not to say that there isn't a larger addressable audience internationally, and that there aren't countries that over-index in reggae listening. I think like we know that, um, and I'm using reggae as kind of like the top level genre because there's kind of think more historically like more listeners in that genre. But over indexes in France, over indexes in the UK, Germany. There's a large population of people, either first generation or second or beyond descendants of Caribbeans in the United States, Canada, Toronto. Like these are all places where and then, of course, like, as well in Africa, these are all places where the music is being listened to and heard and loved and really like, are places where the artists need to lean into, and find their audiences in all these places. I think that's kind of leads to my second point, which I think there's some for, the creators in the Caribbean. I think there needs to be the mindset of trying to like think of how to export the music, think of it as like um beyond kind of like just pointing inward and saying like I really want to reach my audience, and like yes, absolutely, like you have to be addressing your core, but you also have to be like thinking about like where are all the places where I have audiences that I need to kind of like put some extra attention into. One of the sections in the Illuminate report that I referred to earlier was about like which countries have kind of like the highest index in music exported to other countries and like where it's being consumed the most, right? The United States, of course, like still reigns as like the top exporter of music, meaning like, music written and created by people from here that goes to other and is consumed in other countries. But we're starting to see a shift in like that. For instance, Korea is starting to see a big explosion in terms of exportation of music. India, these are countries with like considerable sizes of people, but I think it's also the mindset of some of those artists in terms of like we need to like get our music to other places and like really have our music embraced by other people internationally, and putting as much importance into that as like finding that success with your local core audience. I don't know if I'm like off track now or what.
No, it's good. It's good. I think in a lot of ways, I've been talking about the idea of crossover, not just being to the US, but looking to Latin America and even Africa, because our music is streamed in so many different places. I think what it means to cross over is very different now than it was 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I think that particularly when it comes to reggae and dancehall and soca, like where it's not just one market, that you're kind of looking to get into. And so I think that is hard to kind of conceptualize if you don't have a connection there. You know what I mean? So I think it's important for going back to even my experience going to Costa Rica and understanding what the market really looks and feels like outside of my one single being a hit there. Not that I have a single. I don't have a single.
What? I was just finding out that you're a recording artist right now.
No.
Breaking news.
No.
No, I think that's a really important point, and I think Latin America to me is a huge opportunity for artists in the Caribbean. Costa Rica, for instance, just using my home as an example, is always one of the top streaming destinations for artists from the Caribbean. When we're looking at the data, San Jose, Costa Rica, which is the capital, is like one of the usually within like the top 15 cities for artist releases. And I think that there is a great affinity for Caribbean music, like in Latin America, Central America, and like down into, Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, Chile. There are artists who are kind of like homegrown artists in those areas who do really well. And it wouldn't be a far jump for, I think, artists from, let's say, like Jamaica, just use one country as an example, to like make an effort to try and get to those audiences down there. I think that's part and parcel too of kind of like one of the other overarching philosophies of Ineffable, which is the idea of all these kind of places where the music is being played kind of are part of a bigger picture, right? They speak to the bigger kind of audience. The tapestry is really what I mean to say, like that it's all part of a larger tapestry. And the more that we can find these opportunities to put these artists that are seemingly from different places, well, they are from different places, but are seemingly like, doing different things, but together on one song, or start to like find opportunities for them to collaborate in some way, that actually helps all of those artists across the board increase, right? It helps them increase their audience sizes. I think Adam, who's the president of Ineffable, has really done this pretty incredibly. Again, using Kess as an example, Licky Ticky, right, which came out, and there was a song with Jay Perry, produced by Michael Brun, and it's a soca song, but it's got a little bit of a Haitian flavor to it. And eventually, like a version was flipped into a reggae version that was produced by J Vibe and featured J Boog and Meoli from Hawaii. And that song has been going really strong in the Hawaii market since
Mm-hmm.
that remix came out, a place where Kes really prior to that was pretty much unknown.
Mm-hmm.
That same success story was recently reproduced with Hector Roots Lewis, who had a song that was coming out fire, and we were trying to figure out, who'd be great to put on this verse, and because he had an open verse on the song, and a lot of ideas were thrown around, and we kind of landed on J-Bug, and that song is now one of the top Shazam songs in Hawaii, and is really exposing Hector to like that audience that previously may not have even heard of him, so it opens up the door for him, for artists like him, for artists like Kes, where it's like, okay, we have a song that has been successful here, like maybe the next time we're planning out a tour or something like that, we can go to Hawaii, we can actually like do shows there, we can do a couple shows there, because we know that we have the data, that we have however many like monthly listeners in that area, and it all started because of this track. And then I think the opposite is true as well, like for artists like Stick Figure, where they're Stick Figure has been really successful in the United States. He's really carved out his own place here and built up this pretty incredible sized audience, to the point where he's like a billion spinner on Pandora, just touring kind of nonstop and selling out venues all over the place in the States. But he's, wants to collaborate more with people who are like in other scenes, and reached out and asked like Barrington Levy to collaborate with him, an artist that was very influential for him, when he was starting off making music, and they have a song together, and then Barrington's performing with him at Red Rocks, in front of the sold out crowd of like thousands of people. So I think that is a really big component of what we're trying to do, is unify all these people around the globe, the biggest artists in all these different areas, and put them together on one song, or like, find some sort of collaborative space for them, and really continue to like unify and galvanize the audience internationally.
I thank you, one, for the examples, because I think we don't hear enough of the examples of collaboration, of what can be done and what has been done. We often don't see the stats because it's not necessarily in a Billboard article. It's not flashy, but it's specific examples of where it worked, how it worked, and what was done. And I think we need to see more of that, to also inspire like the next generation of people coming up. What would you say you're excited about in the near future? Like, what are you working on that is exciting for you?
I just want to like kind of maybe put like a little PS on the portion I just spoke about there. I think the collaboration, as we know, has been happening for a long time in different ways.
Yes, I agree.
All the way back to like, the 70s, it's like Peter Tosh is doing songs with Mick Jagger, to the 90s, where, you have Shabba Ranks doing these, or Supercat doing these crossover tracks with, and I know Heavy D is like, from Jamaica, but, he was known in the States as like a hip hop artist, and like those kind of collaborations to the 2000s. You have Gwen Stefani and Lady Saw doing these tracks together, all the way to other instances, like just recently Junior Gong collaborating with, I want to say it was like Kevin Flores or something like that, who's a Colombian artist trying to reach into the Colombian market. I mean, Junior Gong is actually a great example of someone who's been doing this. He and Steven have been doing this their entire career. The Bobby Brown collaborations, the Black Thought collaborations, all that kind of stuff that they've been doing to really try to like work with people who they're interested in working with. And, also being children of a certain age, where, the influence is coming a little bit from the hip hop and R&B, and like infusing itself with reggae. I think collaborations in music in the past, 10 years now have been a thing. Everyone knows to a certain extent it's kind of a cheat code or whatever, but I also think it's really important when it's done from the heart. It can only be done, similar to what I was talking about with social media earlier, about getting artists to post in a genuine way. I think if the music doesn't come from a genuine place when you're doing these collaborations, it's going to come across, people are going to sniff it out, and it's just not gonna work. So it has to really come from that place of like true collaboration. I'll give you one more example just to kind of like put a exclamation point on this, and then move on to your last question. But one of the songs that I helped work on in the past year was this collaboration between Surfer Girl, which is a band from Southern California, and they're kind of like if you took like King Tubby and mashed it up with the Beach Boys. It's kind of like really like surfy driven pop music, but it's also very dubby and kind of like vibey sounding. And putting Surfer Girl together with Kalia on a track that they did, Don't Go. And I just knew when I heard it that in my heart, I was like, I really think that Kalia would be really great on this track. And I really think that she would catch the vibe of what he's, like the songwriter Carter is trying to convey in this song. It's kind of like it's a little bit of a heartbreak song,
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where, sent over the file for Kalia to check out. She's like sending me voice demos, like coming home after like the club when she's in London, like just after really having connected with the song, sending it back to Surfer Girl, having them check it out, and like really start to develop the track. And then by the time it finishes, it was like, yes, that was exactly what I was hoping would happen. They both kind of understood the assignment, but also just felt the track in the right way. And I think that collaboration is just really fantastic and is illustrative of what we do and what we're trying to do more of, is kind of like bridge these worlds and kind of create some magic along the way. So as far as like what I'm excited about in the future, what am I excited about? I think Protege and Lila Ike have recently started working with Ineffable, and being able to hear those projects ahead of time, it's kind of one of those things where you're just like, I want everyone to hear this, because those two are like really special and pretty amazing sounding. Obviously both pretty thoughtful, just driven and passionate artists who are creating music from the heart, and are doing it in really kind of just deliberate ways. It's not like, let's just get an album out. I think their philosophy is like, this can't come out until it's right. And I'm just really excited about those two. I've heard some early stuff from The Movement, which is another one of our bands. There's another one of the bands that is on the Ineffable client roster, and just some really incredible stuff there. They're from here in the United States, and what they're doing in terms of kind of combining the reggae sound with I think like some slight electronic music is, and they've been doing this like throughout their career, but I just really see them as being very boundary breaking, and I really love the stuff that I'm hearing there. Man, I don't know. I feel like I keep going on. I mentioned that project is on the horizon. That one's really fantastic. Hector's project is also on the horizon. That one is produced by Johnny Cosmic, who is the guitarist for Stick Figures band, but also is a producer in his own right and a musician in his own right. And just the sound of that one is like pretty incredible. I think Hector's tapping into some really, he's really like reaching back to the kind of like sound from the 70s and 80s, but also it's just fresh and modern, and I think that collaboration between the two of them has yielded some like pretty incredible music. And I don't know, I feel like I could just keep going, like rattling off everyone that's working with us. I think we're very fortunate to be working with a group of people who are incredibly talented. Emily Brimlow is someone else who I think is worth mentioning, because Ineffable is very much perceived as a reggae like label, and true, like that. I think like a lot of the artists on our roster are reggae for the most part. Emily is a singer songwriter from LA who primarily does kind of like pop music, but is just an incredible songwriter. And she caught Adam's attention via a post on Instagram where she was singing an unreleased song called "I Fall in Love Too Easily," and it just immediately captured his attention. And then also that video clip happened to go viral, despite the song not having even been released yet. So we, reached out, and now she's like working with Ineffable, and the stuff that she's writing is just really fantastic. I mean, just I think if you appreciate good songwriting, no matter what the genre, then you should check her music out.
Awesome. Well, we're already like an hour into our conversation, and I feel like we could go another hour, but I'm not going to take up all your time. So you have such an extensive catalog of music love that I have to ask these questions. All right. So what are you playing when is the question. What are you playing when you're getting ready to go out? What are you listening to?
What am I playing when I'm getting ready to go out?
Yes. And it
Probably,
doesn't have to be
probably
Caribbean,
dancehall.
but
No,
okay. All right. All
probably
right. All
dancehall.
right.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. I mean, I listen to dancehall probably primarily.
Yeah.
That's like what I listen to the most of, and all kinds of, like every era of it. From brand new stuff to, old school original stuff. I mean, again, I'm the child of the 80s and 90s, so like to a certain extent, like I always have to go back and listen to my General Degrees and Sham and that whole era. But yeah, love dancehall for sure.
Okay. All right. So there's a dinner party at your house. What's on your playlist?
It kind of depends who's coming over, don't you think?
Very true. Very true. Friends.
Yeah, I mean, if it's some people that I want to like chat with and like kick back with, I usually put on some instrumental music. So like, for instance, I might put on like a combination of like dub and I'm not just saying that because I'm like, oh, Mr. Reggae or whatever, but like I do love listening to dub reggae a lot. So I might put on like a combination like dub and like maybe some low key like salsa and cumbia and stuff in the background.
Okay.
I also really love this band who's gotten to be pretty big now. They're called Krogbin, and they're just like this instrumental trio, and they do like, it's like a combination between surf rock and funk and kind of like international sound, like guitar sounds and like hip hop, laid back, low file style drumming and dubby bass, and it's just really, really fantastic stuff. I'm really interested in them because I love their guitarist. I think he's like fantastic, and as a guitar player, I listen to that and I'm kind of like, oh my god, is he doing all this stuff?
All right, I'm gonna switch up my last question.
Okay.
You're introducing to an 8-year-old a genre of your choice. Pick any genre, and you want to put this 8-year-old on to some good music. What would you play for them?
Okay. Well, I have a 7-year-old, so this
okay, so this is right up your alley.
Yeah, this is something I do all the time. But she's a music head, so it's like she has her lane.
Well, you're her dad, so I'm assuming she's supposed to be a music head.
Yeah, but she's got her own lane of music that she likes, and that she is like, so it's hard for me to actually kind of penetrate that.
Yes. No, just play it. I'm the same way. My older daughter and even my younger one, they are, even though you don't think that they get it, they're listening.
Yeah. How do I introduce it? To be honest with you, like I would probably try to play something like soca because it's to me that's kind of like it's an easy barrier of entry there, you know what I mean? Like it's melodic, it's fun, high, usually like high BPM or kind of up tempo, and all the choruses are like sing-along choruses. I actually have a video of my daughter, who's now 7, but like she was maybe a year or a year and a half old. She was still in like her high chair eating, and me playing family in the background, and she's like jumping around in her you know. But I try to play more, I try to play soca stuff for her. I try to play like reggae, and she hasn't really like fully latched onto it yet. Right now she's like in her Taylor Swift phase, which I'm like,
she's in her Swiftie era.
But actually I'll say this. She also really loves what's her name? Charlie XX or XCX.
XCX.
Yeah. So which I love too. So that's kind of like where we're meeting in the middle, is like we're having like Brat summer, but also now Brat winter, and I'm the Brat dad and she's Brat daughter. So
I love it. I love
we're vibing there.
Well, thank you so much, Diego. I had such a great time talking with you. You're always welcome back on the show anytime. And thank you so much again. It was a pleasure.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is great, and I can't wait to come back. We'll rap some more about just straight up music and do less industry talk next time. Okay?
Yes, that'll be fun. All right, I'm gonna put that in your schedule now.
Okay. I'm ready. Let me know.
All right, until next time, later, my peeps.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Style and Vibes podcast. If you like what you hear, and I know you do, share it with your friends and family. If you want more, make sure you visit styleandvibes.com and follow us on our social channels, Twitter and Instagram @Style and Vibes. Until next time, Leah Tommy Peeps.